So I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce you guys to the phenomenal, internationally renowned artist, Ted Ellis, my man. I've been knowing him.
Really? Oh my goodness.
He is, we got a little bit of African American art royalty in the place. Yes, I've been knowing, I'm sounding crazy. I've been knowing Ted for almost since I started collecting. We've been knowing each other for like 25 years.
When you was a baby.
Yes, when I was a baby in this
You was a baby.
And so he has watched this, y'all. He has not just coached me, he has mentored me, and he has cultured me, right? That's a new one, Rocky. He's cultured me, Leonard, in African-American art and collecting. You know, I've been able to meet a number of artists. Back in the day, you know, Michael was talking to you last week about the golden age of African-American art. It was around that time that I met Ted. And the interesting thing is, man, we like the Jacob Javits Center, New York.
Wow.
And you know, Temple University, October Gallery,
Wow. Yep.
Art on the Riverfront in Delaware.
Oh, Delaware. Wow.
You know, the African American Festival in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the Boom Show, right.
Cleveland Fine Arts.
Cleveland Fine Arts.
Yeah,
and
Cleveland,
you know what? And then there was one, Christina, at the Camelot. You remember?
That's right, at the church.
At the Camelot, at the church in Upper Marlboro, which is now Bowie. And
I don't know how you remember these things.
Man, because you know what? Because I have stories at each one.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
I have stories at each one. And so I could I have stories at each one because I could tell you I had an opportunity. Christine, I'm going to tell you this when we're going to get on into it. I had an opportunity to get a Woodrow Nash. Before Woodrow Nash was Woodrow Nash, Karen. You know what I'm saying? Before Woodrow Nash was Woodrow Nash.
Yeah, me too.
And at that time, I could have got myself like a bust or something for like $1,000 or
that's right,
or something like that. Rocky, I was sitting up and saying, ain't no way in the world, Michael. I kind of had that juice right there, and I was being real cautious with my funds. And then I think I was talking to Ted about this the other day. I think back at that opportunity, Michael.
Man.
Thinking about that opportunity, and I'm like, what in the world I was thinking, man, if I could have done that then, look, Daryl, if I could have done that back then, and it was just like 1,000 or 12 or 1,500 in the day, those pieces of work about $8-9 grand. What was I thinking, right? So it's one of those teachable lessons for me. And Ted was there, George Knock was there.
Yeah.
You know, Walter and Kathy Shannon from E&S Gallery was there. It was a proverbial who's.
Keith Golden.
You know,
everybody.
Keith Golden was there. And look, and then I think one year I went to the show at the Puck Building, and Ted was up in the place with my girl from Lanham, Vargas.
Who?
Elba Vargas.
Elba Vargas. So I was like, Ted, what you doing? He said,
and Reggie Coleman.
Yeah.
From where? From where?
She was from
Lanham, Maryland.
That's where I live.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was doing a doggone thing. So I think that was 1 year.
I live in Lanham.
Yeah, she was a distributor.
Yeah.
A distributor of prints and posters. And I convinced Elba that she needed to participate in the Puck show. So she had James Denmark, myself, and a couple of other artists, and probably the most successful show ever in New York. I mean, in the country.
Oh yeah,
Black Fine
Art. Well, I love the Puck. Yeah, I love the
National Black Fine Art Show. I think that day I missed Daryl by a couple hours. No,
probably.
I was there. You were like coming after me. But anyway, you guys, as you can see, we have a rich history. Together, we all are connected. That tells you, like, I think in when it comes to African American art, there are only like 3 degrees of separation. I think collectors know a collector that knows a collector. So even if you don't know the collector, somebody else that's a collector knows the other person is a collector. And so I'm just really excited that we can come together and share. You know, artists can share with collectors, collectors can share with artists. And one thing that I realized about this whole thing is that artists are also collectors.
Right.
Right? So the way that they do things, you know, Michael last week talked about a piece that he got from Charlie Palmer, and a piece that Charlie Palmer got from him that's right behind Michael on his wall. And so, you know, and I know that there's some work that other artists have in their collection. Some of them allowed me to go in the vault, Ted, and see what they have. And I've been able to see that different artists kind of swap and they do things with each other. That, so they have, artists in and of themselves have a phenomenal collection. So
Michael was your feature last week, right?
Yes, Michael was the feature last week.
Yeah, sorry I missed you, Michael. I have the first Monday of each month is a board meeting for me in the evening, an arts board that I'm on. So I couldn't join. So I apologize.
No problem.
But Christina, you can see most of Michael's session on Facebook because I did post it.
Okay. Look for it.
And it's also, I believe, on my YouTube channel. But let's go ahead and get started because we just went down. We just had a little.
That's okay. That's a good thing.
We went to a reunion, man. That was a part of my introduction to let you know how fantastic I think this brother is. He's doing some wonderful things. To me, he's a legend, but he's also a historian and a culturist. In the African American, I'm creating new words now. He cultured me, so he's a culturist in the African American art scene. So every time I get, he's an activist when it comes to art as well. And so every time I hang out with Ted, when I either see Ted or I talk to Ted, I'm getting a lesson. Like I feel like I went to a college class and I should be getting an A and 3 credits. But that we gonna move forward with that. But we're excited to have him, and we're excited to have you guys. And I don't see Leonard, but hey, Leonard. Oh, there's you are, Leonard. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So 5 questions, and then you guys can, if you have questions, can ask. We have a couple announcements at the end. And we're going to keep it moving. Number 1, Ted, how did your journey as an artist begin?
Wow. You know, we have points of influence that sort of, get you excited, that motivate you. I had 2 relatives. One was an illustrator. And my second point of motivation, my other cousin, Albert did everything well, and he used to collect Marvel and DC comic books, and he would sketch and draw them, and so I just did the same thing, had a tremendous interest in it, and it just never left me. So from an early age, being motivated by comic strips. Books, from New Orleans. So when I was old enough, I was able to, take public transit and go to the French Quarters. And so this was this little bitty kid, probably about 12 years of age. My shoe size, I probably was wearing like a size 10. I was only 4'10". And they say, here's this little kid, this little black kid with 1,000 questions coming to the French Quarters. And I'd leave there and go to the public library and check out books off of Loyola Avenue and go back home and paint at the kitchen table. So, that was my early influence with art. As I got a little bit older and a little bit more involved, I started participating with classroom instructions. New Orleans Center for Creative Arts, NOCA, which is a school that's dedicated for the arts. I had a chance to attend there during the summer programs, and that took it to a whole nother level. And afterwards, I kept painting. I got into art clubs. We painted murals in the high school. We painted on the principal's wall. We had 3 floors, 3 levels that the principal let us have added on creating murals that reflected our culture and our history. And I just saw the importance of it, you know, the visual messaging in art and how it says nothing but says everything. And so I knew it was really a powerful instrument. Later on, went to Dillard University, got my degree in chemistry. I did well academically in school. So I said, you know, I'm gonna be a chemist. I thought it was hard. Majored in chemistry, was planning on getting my engineering degree. A lot of times I was in the labs and in the classroom painting and doodling. Had my first exhibition at Dillard University library. You know, Elizabeth Catlett, she taught there. And I started reading and learning about the history of art and art activism. And I said, you know, I want to be just like these guys. You know, I want to be very intentional with my paint and my brush. And so I knew I had to immerse myself and learn as much as I could about my predecessors. You know, those artists that were very intentional about using their art as an instrument of uplifting their community, their family, and themselves. And so, you know, when I looked at Ed Bannister, you know, out of Boston, you know, painting, was a barber. His wife was a nurse. They were active in Boston, Underground Railroad and so forth. You know, he was a landscape painter on top of it. You know, I knew I had to be just as prolific, just as comfortable and learn as much as I can about art, but having some purpose with the art. You know, Henry Ossawa Tanner, you know, left the United States, went over to Europe, painted, got funding very early. You know, years later, I come across a Tanner piece, and I have a chance to be involved in selling a Tanner piece to a collector for a significant amount of money, and then name my son Tanner. You know, just looking at the work. You know, we fast forward, we look at the intentionality of Du Bois and the Harlem Renaissance movement. So when we move from slavery to Reconstruction to the redemptive period, we know that those other folks who did not look like us, who did not want us to have our freedom, did everything to deconstruct the image of the Negro. I mean, you know, to a point that it debased us, it dehumanized us, it put us in a subhuman category. And Du Bois looked at that with all the other intellectual thinkers of the time and says, you know, we got to reconstruct this whole new image of the African. And that was the new Negro movement. And that started in Harlem. And one way out of that, you know, Du Bois and the other big thinkers, Alain Locke and so forth, said we have to use the arts to make that happen. And so they asked all the writers, all the performers, the visual artists to come together and reconstruct this image of the African. And culture was at the epicenter of that. And so when I tell you guys, you know, I'm not just in the art business, I'm in a culture business, and my culture is priceless. It's important. It's important how we conduct ourselves and what we do with our art, that we're very purposed in making things happen for the betterment of ourselves. I mean, images drive value. It's what people see and what people believe. And I know my advocacy and our advocacy is what hangs up on that wall or on that easel. You know, everybody gets a chance to look at that and interpret it from their point of understanding, their experiences, shared experiences. Whether you're 3 years old or you're 80 years old, you're going to get something out of that piece of art. And you know, it's important that we have the kind of platform that will support and nurture African-American artists. It's very fragile out here right now. We don't have enough material out here documenting the exploits of and the journey of African-American artists. It seemed to be right at the end of the, I want to say the post-Harlem Renaissance movement, Jacob Lawrence and Bearden and Catlett, that we forgot about the importance of the artists. You know, Maslow hierarchy was that the artist was very much at the top of the apex. That we look for them for guidance, for intellect. You got to think about in Europe that they use art to communicate stories because people could not read, and so we are very critical in facilitating the importance of sharing information, engaging and enlightening, and our story has not been completely told. And if it has been, it has not been from our persuasion or point of reference. And that's why I commend Sheila when she put out a book, and that narrative was of the old masters and the contemporaries to bridge that gap, to say there's some evolution and involvement beyond certain periods. There's a next period in this. And we all have a responsibility in this art ecosystem. You know, the artists, the collectors, the patrons, the sponsors, the curators, the executive directors. I mean, it's incumbent that we have this conversation and we have a platform to get the message out, a message that's specifically pointed on what we want to get accomplished. You know, culture is business at the end of the day in America and in the rest of the world. So from my early beginnings to right now, you know, it is about so much of advocating and activism. It's like what my contemporaries were very instrumental in pushing forward. I had a moment to spend several hours with Samela Lewis, and I had these big, bright ideas. We was by Dr. Diane Locke's house till 5:30 in the morning, and we were talking. And I said, well, we need to start doing videos. She says, young man, we did videos. Well, we got to start publishing book. We published book. Her and Benny Andrews sat in their living room, and you know, they didn't have any documentation of them. So our artists were very scholarly, very intentional, very deliberate. I mean, Bearden was a phenomenal scholar. Jacob Nim was brilliant, you know, in telling that story and that narrative. The Toussaint L'Ouverture series, the Migration series, all that is literacy. That's visual literacy. And so, you know, I looked at that and was very intentional very early to say that, you know, I gotta have that continuation of telling that story. And so, you know, that has gotten me to this point. You know, 20 years later, I decided to get my master's in museum studies. May 16th is my official graduation date. So I got the master's. My intent is to go ahead and get the doctor on cultural appropriation and how that impacts our community. Everything is driven in America off of policy. Policies become law. And at the policy level, the undercurrent is culture. If there's no value for your culture, then the laws are not going to work out in your favor. Because the policy is going to be written against you. And that has happened for African Americans for the course of our American history. So the artists played critical. Du Bois was on point, man. Du Bois was brilliant. I mean, he surrounded himself by artists. Some of his best friends were visual artists. You know, that's why when you get Quincy on it, Quincy has a bit more of that history than I do to share with us. But you know, we still have a lot to do. We're challenged, but I'm also excited because we are built off of hope and optimism. You know, we artists typically can see around the corner when nobody else can, and they have a level of intestinal fortitude that will push them forward continuously. So what we have to do is plan accordingly, look at history, sometimes get outside of the vacuum that we in as individual artists, and force ourselves to work together, to strategize and be purpose in what we want to get done. We have no avocation on the Hill in Washington, D.C. We need to have a lobby group that will petition our intent and what we want to do as artists, you know, now, you know, and in the future. And we need to have a consistent plan that we look at. You know, museum institutions have a mission statement and vision statement. They policies drive their mission and their vision. As African American artists, we need to have long-term plans on how we will maintain our value and our importance. You know, we started with different groups, the Dedicators, National Conference of Artists, the Afro-Cobra movement out of Chicago, BAM, Black African movement. You know, all was critical, primarily during the 70s when we were fighting against inequality and stuff. Moving after that, you know, we sort of got into this entrepreneurial thing on how to take our art to market, and we've excelled in that category. But we're missing some pieces on the intentionality behind the activism and stuff that really adds value to who we are, and also it also gives you that recognition factor outside of what you're doing by yourself. It just takes it to a whole nother level. I mean, it happened with Benny Andrews. It happened with Samela Lewis. It happened with Jacob Lawrence. It happened with Lois Malou Jones, Margaret Burroughs. You know, very intentional in their culture, their history, and their heritage. All right, Sheila, next question.
Okay, so you already answered part of the next question. So my next question was, what have you been up to? And part of that I know was, I was hoping you would talk about working on your master's, but you talked about that. So talk to us about your work with the commission.
So the 400 Years of African American History Commission was established under Public Law 115-102, and that's to celebrate and commemorate the contributions of African Americans under British rule since 1619. I tell you, was a major challenge for this commission, because this commission was formed 2 months ahead of the anniversary year of 2019 with no federal funding. To this date, we've gotten $3.3 million to exercise our programs on writing a new history and what that looks like in the preservation of African American culture. So we've selected 400 schools that we have supported financially. We've also opened up a grant platform that we've been able to give out grants and execute. You know, $3.3 million for 400 years is not much, but I will tell you, you know, this is one of the few commissions that got funded, an African American commission that got funded. So the intestinal fortitude of the 14 members to be persuasive, you know, I mean, to stay in there, to stay in the fight, you know, for that recognition, it was a monumental challenge. We had the anniversary at Fort Monroe this past August of 2019, which was exceptional. We started the Distinguished Service Award to recognize those unsung heroes in the African American community throughout the United States. I'm also the vice chair of the commission, as well as the chair for sports, entertainment, and culture. And we're underway with you know, creating additional platforms and programs. We're going to be addressing definitely the issues of the economic disparity in the African American community, the level of incarceration, medical apartheid, the contributions of African Americans in music and dance and the visual arts and performing arts. I mean, those are areas that some are recognized and some are unrecognized in. We sunset July of 2021. You know, it's a passion of love for me. What it has done for me in the learning curve was to understand the mechanics behind how DC works on a political level. You know, how you have to go out and advocate, you know, where to go at and advocate, you know, who you're speaking to, you know, what's the topics of discussion, who's in charge of that? Is that the Ways and Means Commission? Is that the Department of Agriculture? You know, National Endowment of Arts, you know, who's been there working behind the scenes for the last 15 or 20 years. And so when I tell you that we don't have that much lobbying for African American artists on the Hill, it's probably nil and none. You know, the fact that we have the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, you know, that's a godsend blessing. Lonnie Bunch, who's one of the commissioners on the commission, he's also has the Smithsonian system, as well as Dr. Rex Ellis, who managed the curatorial affairs for the Smithsonian, which is retired. He's currently the chair of the 400 Years of African American History and Culture. So it's the only federal institution representing African American history and culture since the Freedmen's Bureau Commission that started in 1865 outside of slavery. So, you know, a very important resource and entity that is advocating for the importance of our history and our culture. But that's just part of it. We have other organizations out there that have been working hard to do the same thing, ASALA. But the big disconnect is working collectively together. You know, singing that same tune, with the same tonality and stuff. moving in the same direction. That seems to be the challenges for us right now.
Okay. So I know that Ted is sharing a lot of information with you guys. So I know the Q&A is going to be fantastic. I kind of feel that coming. Hey, Ted, why is it, I know where you're going, so here we go. Why is it important to collect African-American art?
Oh. You know, it is so much our culture. It's so much our history. It's our flavor. It's our vernacular. It's our conversation. It's who we are. You know, and the visual medium is a powerful medium. I mean, it speaks and resonates to you. If you go West Africa, you know, contemporary West Africa, if you look at Nigeria, Ghana, customs and traditions, the bulk of the folks who left there during the slave trade that migrated to the United States and to the Caribbean and stuff came from West Africa. It was all about customs and tradition. So, you know, we have a tremendous affinity for color, for texture, for mood, for music. I mean, it's us. I mean, we've given the world our gift. Yeah. I mean, that's it. And yeah. It's a balance with nature. It's a balance with the universe. I mean, we come in line with that. It's a rhythm that we have. We choose to express that through our paint, but we got multiple channels to do that in. I mean, it's in the music, it's in the spoken word. You know, it's in the dress, it's in the walk. I mean, it's an innate thing. You know, when you're talking about, you know, memory, blood memory, DNA memory, we have that. I mean, it is a trait that's within us. So it's easy for us to express. Art is a necessity. It really is. It gives us a balance. It gives us a wholeness. It gives us comfort. It gives us joy. It excites our memories. I mean, our thoughts. It makes us recollect. It's everything that we need to sustain ourselves. And so, you know, right now, you know, this post-pandemic piece, you know, folks are looking for artists, for comfort, you know, for encouragement, for motivation. So we get a chance to show our worth. We're the closest thing to the creator, in a sense that, you know, we conceptualize it, we see it, we manifest it, and we bring it to life, and we share it with others, so that it uplifts them. I mean, that's what we do. That's what we always do, and we do it under adverse conditions. You know, I mean, we don't have all the resources. We always giving. We're constantly giving. I mean, just the nobility of spirit, the purpose and the intent. I mean, nobody is as transparent as the artist, and we're unsung and we're unrecognized. I mean, part of the reason me to go back to school, because I knew not much was being written on contemporary African American artists. I also know that there's not enough long-term systemic programming for African American artists. And so, you know, being out here for 25, 30 something years, you know, looking at it, you know, being involved, you know, that's my extended family out there. When I'm out there, when I'm away from home. I mean, we share time and space for a moment, but we know we're out there to go out and feed our families. And sometimes the misfortune is that sometimes we don't do that. But, you know, we pick it up and we know that tomorrow is going to be a better day. So much the spirit of our ancestors, you know, from that slave ship, separated by language and geography. They got off that slave ship and they said tomorrow's going to be a better day. And that is such the spirit of the artist. Every day they get an idea inside their head that they want to speak to, you know, and brave and audacious enough to put it out there that people will receive it and accept it, you know. And sometimes they have to handle the rejection. I remember when Woodrow wouldn't even sell not one thing. We went to Peoria, Illinois, and them folks looked at Woodrow stuff like, man, this stuff is from outer space. And Woodrow sat out there for 3 days. I think he sold one piece at the end of it, loaded all that stuff back on that truck by itself, but he didn't quit. Turn around, you see him in Detroit selling out. You see him at the Essence Festival. If y'all ever at the Essence Festival next to Woodrow, you hear his bubble wrap. And it's wrapped up and you say, oh my goodness, man, when am I gonna make a sale? Woodrow just racking up sales left and right. but we have the courage to stay in there, the fortitude to stay in there. Sheila, it's I've been at this long enough to see a lot of things through, to see the successes, to see the failures, to see the shortcomings, to see some dreams, not happen for artists, and we all feel that. You live long enough, you see it. But when you see an artist and you says, Ted, man, I ain't sold not one piece of art, a ceramic piece of art. He said, I'm going back to school. And this artist went back to school, and about 10 years later, Theaster Gates was the rage. I mean, just cutting it up, folks sponsoring, big old projects for him and everything else. He's getting the NASA award in Dallas, first African-American get the NASA award. So, staying in the game is an important piece of it. Running with your passion, let your passion hold you. Even when folks don't believe in you, you got to hold on to what you believe in, not having any animosity toward anybody else, but just to be encouraged and just to say, listen, I can do this thing. And it will happen. You just don't know. There's something about specificity, being spot on, knowing your target, and staying almost razor focus on it. There are a couple of examples out there. Theaster was one of them. Rick Lowe, who I know who's a MacArthur Genius Grant writer in Houston, was another. His was through art activism. He put down the paint. He wanted to do some very unique and robust stuff inside the community. Eventually got it funded. 20 years later, he became a MacArthur Fellow. Now, when that happens, that means that all your projects are pre-sold. That means whatever you got up here before you put it on the thing, it's funded and done. Yeah. I mean, that's the reality of it. There's some artists that says, listen, I'm gonna go the academic route. I'm gonna go the fast lane route. I'm gonna head up to the Studio Museum of Harlem. I'm going to Yale. I'm gonna get Yale's distribution. I'm gonna get access very early. That's being strategic and spot on. That's Candy Wiley. Then you look at somebody like Kadir Nelson, who's a brilliant genius artist. Just excellent. You could easily say he's the African-American Rockwell, Norman Rockwell. Kadir is extremely talented, very humble, and a brilliant artist. But I can also take another artist, a couple artists, Frank Morrison. I could take Kevin Williams. These guys who are very disciplined in their lane of speaking through their art, extremely prolific and dedicated. They'll tell you, don't come to a gunfight with a knife, Ted, because you're going to get your lunch taken from you. Having that passion, having that commitment, having that strategy and purpose where you see yourself at and says, nobody's going to stop me to get me there. And it may not get there when you want it, but if you stay there, at least you're going to enjoy the journey. I may not get in MoMA, I may not get in the Whitney, but y'all, I am enjoying my journey, and nobody can take that away from it. So that piece of it is priceless. So my fellow artists, always enjoy your journey, and don't be afraid to get one of them old cats and say, man, how you did this, or what are you doing right now? I love it when Simi Knox will chime in on my page and say, Ted, you're doing the darn thing. And then we get on the phone, he said, you got to get this kind of mask here, man. You got to be around. You got to beat this COVID-19 thing. And, but, I ran up on Mr. Knox at the National Black Fine Arts Show in Atlanta. And this guy was an extreme talent. That's 30 years ago. I said, man, what are you doing here? I said, you don't need to be here. And I had looked through his book and everything else. It was Camille Cosby, Bill Cosby, Ed Gordon. He had a who's who of folks that he had did all the commissions and stuff. I said, you just here to show us what we need to be doing, working toward excellence. Now that's 30-some years ago, and we still sharing conversation. I remember Cal Massey, talking to Cal Massey, Mr. Jefferson. All these old, brilliant folks, Carl Owens, still, Paul Goodnight, man. If you can reach out to Paul and listen to Paul with his advocacy and his activism. I mean, it's incredible. You know, you think you inventing something new, them cats have already thought about it and did a lot of that already. You know, National Conference of Artists have been international. You know, they've done the Pan-African movement in partnership with the Afro-Cobra movement. I mean, these brothers have been very intentional. So, you know, what does that look like with us reaching out, you know, leveraging the technology like Zoom, you know, sharing our stories, documenting our stories. You know, that's part what Dr. Wright wants to do and what she's doing right now. But we build upon that. You know, I'm encouraged. You know, we're in a bit of a flux right now because of the pandemic and COVID-19, but that does not stop us. And we have to continue to build and continue to leverage this opportunity for us. And it is an opportunity for us.
Okay. So Ted, you've already answered this question, I think, but I think you may have more to add. And this is a two-parter. It was kind of one, but I put it. What drives you as an artist, as an art activist? What drives you?
Well, you know, my assessment is that you know, inside of our community and outside our community is a respect for our culture and our identity, and culture is capital. You know, I mean, it's currency, and we need to understand that. We need to understand that across the board. We need to create the kind of programs that will magnify the importance of our identity, our past identity. So, you know, we don't run away from slavery. We absorb that and we grow and we learn from that. That's part of our history. You know, so you know, grabbing hold of that, you know, telling that story, sharing that story. You know, that when we talk about resiliency, that's who we are. You know, to be able to bounce back, to get back up. You know, to mount the charge. You know, from the point where somebody is always holding you down, you find a way to get up, you know, and to excel. I mean, that's some strength in there. That's some resolve. You know, when, like I said, when you come over here, you know, not knowing the language or geography, and you find a way to build schools, to build churches, to learn the language, that shows a level of acuity, of strength, intestinal fortitude that's unmatched historically. So I own that, you know, and I tell that story. So when you're talking about, you know, the cultural bearers, you know, particularly African American women or African women who are responsible in West Africa, you know, when right before they were to get wed, they were reminded that they had to share their stories with their children, who they are, where they came from, what their religion was, and so forth. And that was incubated, you know, on those slave ships, that those stories were preserved and kept. And so when we got to the West Indies, when we got to the Caribbeans, when we got to the United States, it was our cultural bearers that were very intentional on making sure that we did not lose who we are and where we came from. And this was probably our most challenging time as Africans, you know, being torn away from their motherland. I mean, that's just, I couldn't imagine that, you know, how to sustain, you know, 6 and 7 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, you know, in a barren ship, in the bellows of a ship that had no AC, stench and filth that they had to survive, you know, for the future of us. So I don't take it lightly, knowing the level of preparation that they had to for my future. You know, they saw that the unborn was going to be the future, that we were going to be the future. So I owe that to my ancestors to do the best that I can in what I do. You know, whether that's my paint, you know, whether that's being a father, being a husband, you know, being a neighbor, is that I have to be the best at what I do, work at it constantly, you know, so that it will uplift my family and my community, so that we could live better. And that's you know, that's my driver in my paint. You know, I mean, that's it. So if I'm going to do a pictorial anthology of African Americans in religion, African Americans in the cotton field, African Americans in the legal profession, in the medical profession, well, there's some intention behind that. You know, my Color of Music series, you know, what's that anthology on gospel, from blues, you know, to reggae, you know, contemporary stuff, you know, knowing what's so critically important and to be able to put that on paint, you know. And so that's my motivation behind what I do. I'll tell you, you know, I'm not in the art business, I'm in the culture business, and my culture is priceless. So I don't play around with it. And I don't want anybody shortchanging that. I don't want the promoters out here putting on shows and not giving the right kind of provenance, you know, and putting together stuff. You know, you got to call them to the table on it. You know, exhibition opportunities, galleries, when they take the work and co-sign it from the artist, and, you know, and don't give them a signed contract. You know, what is that about? You know, they think the artist is going to forget about the work and stuff like that. And these artists are the ones that's telling that story and that narrative and making it benefit so that you can provide for your business at the end of the day. So treat the artist, the genesis of it all, with the level of respect and notoriety that should be in place for them. It's so much we have to do. So much I got to get done in this little short time frame. So, you know, when I look at the NAACP Image Awards, you know, where's the visual arts category? You know, I mean, that's it. You know, where are the 100 contemporary African-American artists that are living now, or 1,000 African-American artists that are being showcased in programs with the Smithsonian African-American Museum, National African-American Museum of History and Culture? I mean, these are things that we got to figure out how to do. You know, Sheila, you got started with the books. There'll be volumes of books on contemporary African-American artists, you know, lecture opportunities, you know, showcasing opportunities. You know, how do we take this virtual medium platform, you know, and start funding artists? You know, my artists, for the most part, you know, it's challenging that space. They always got to make sacrifices. You know, I can tell you a lot of my artist friends who don't have insurance, whose family have been broken and splintered because there's a tremendous amount of passion for the arts and telling that story and that narrative. But it puts so much pressure on the family that it breaks the family. I mean, these are personal friends. You know, I've been blessed to be able to maneuver and keep things together, but it's always a major challenge.
Okay, this is the last question I have, and I know there's already one in the group chat. If any of you have questions that you'd like to put in the group chat, you're more than welcome to do so. Or we're just going to have a free flowing round in a few minutes of questions. My last one, we have a couple of artists. We have a few artists on in the session tonight. So Ted, do you have any pearls of wisdom for young, emerging, or aspiring artists?
Yeah, you know, early on, this curator says, you know, Mr. Ellis, don't let anybody steal your passion and your joy on what you do. You know, that's mom, that's dad, that's girlfriend. If you love this and this gives you everything, then you stay at it, and it will find its way. It will find its way to be shared with others. Man, you know, I will always tell you, you know, I ain't the best skilled artist. You know, I do what I love doing. But Walt Disney, Merck Pharmaceutical, ExxonMobil, State Farm, 400 Years of African American History Commission, Old Dominion University, the Sable Museum, Charles Wright Museum, you know, it finds a way. Listen, your passion plan is your best plan. That's it. It's what your passion.
I'm gonna write that down, Leonard. These are some good T-shirts. Okay.
You know, that is it. You know, your joy in work, man. That is it. And when you do that, you know, you just call the universe to you. It just comes to you. My brother-in-law has a young brother, Maurice Hicks. And I said, Mo, don't you ever change your style. You just keep doing it, man. You do it. You do you. And Mo cutting it up in New Orleans, doing him, his own kind of way. your own, you know, we explore, we go through this, but you're gonna settle in your own artist thumbprint, your DNA. It's gonna come out, and you're gonna know it. You're gonna know when you just feel comfortable in doing it, you know. And you have folks gonna say, man, you just, you know, you ain't doing everything you're supposed to be doing in that paint, but it's my paint. and I'm honest about it, and I can stand behind any one of my paintings in here, you know, because I know where it came from, you know, and so if we do that, we're gonna be okay, and you won't let discouragement come in, you know. It's so many variables to discourage you, man, in this game, you know. It's overwhelming, you know. We don't put a premium on the importance of African American artists, you know, in America. Two, in our community, we don't see the art as a major priority. For a few, but for the most, it's not. It's just not there. Because when you have an artist, I'll tell you an exceptional artist right now in the Maryland area, Pancho Brown. Pancho was probably 10 or 15 years ahead of me in the art game. And it has been exceptional, has been prolific. I mean, have watched the market. At this point in time, a university would have said, you know, we need to document his accomplishments, his life accomplishments right now. He shouldn't have to go out there and be the entrepreneur in doing that. We're gonna do it anyway. But the other folks in academia, you know, the gallerists, the publishers, the dealers would typically come in that space and do that. We don't have that as African American artists. You know, we got to self-promote and do everything till we create enough value that other folks want to jump on it. And then during that time, you know, well, he self-promotes too much. But I can say, you know, I've added tremendous value with my images that has enlightened you to move you to a point where you weren't, you know, and your development as a collector, as a patron, as a sponsor, as a curator. So what we do, you know, it gives so much value, but that value is not given back to us the way it should. That's one piece that of the puzzle that we have to fix. You know, we sort of, let me say this. Our artists are like probably a raw diamond, just needs to be polished. And that polish is the infrastructure, that platform and that foundation that gives you an opportunity to nourish. So if I say, you know, hey, this year, this one young artist, you know, we've looked at this one young artist, we're gonna bring 20 patrons over there and we're gonna buy a significant piece, and we're gonna place that piece, we're gonna have a strategic plan to place that piece in the Reginald Lewis Museum for that one young artist. And we're gonna do this every year, you know, for another artist, or however, when we can do that. You know, those are the ancillary things that needs to happen outside of us making enough noise that folks run and collect us. We don't have a building platform that has the depth to provide that kind of nurturing support for our artists. And typically what you have African-American artists who are smart enough and see this very early. You know, they don't involve themselves in the African-American community. They move beyond the African-American community because we don't have the level of sophistication to move our artists to the next platform. It just doesn't happen. I'm 30 years in the business, and I've seen it, you know, in multiple markets. And then we have a challenge of creating a communication matrix that we're having this conversation among collectors, among patrons, among sponsors, you know, tying in that whole ecosystem on what that looks like. You know, a lot of times, you know, I've always had this argument, we're still stuck on one group of artists. I said, you know, what are you saying, that there's nobody else after that's significant or have value that's in your community that's telling a story? And then have we put that under a microscope when we look at, you know, and I'll say this, my predecessor, Jacob Lawrence from Mayor Beard and Catholic, when you have this Jewish constituency that has come in and built this foundation and platform and tied them into a network to establish that. So out of virtue, have we looked at that and says, we need to create these same kind of vehicles for our own? And that's what we have to do. We have to take our own, see the value in it, define it from our point of reference, and open up these opportunities and lane for our artists. Instead of letting other folks decide who our champions are. And then we come behind and support the folks that they picked up and said are our champions. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not defining our own from our own community. And so, that's part of what Catlett and Catlett, when she left and went to Mexico, was frustrated. But Samela had the artistic acuity to really think this through, along with Benny Andrews and several other artists, National Conference of Artists, who looked at this and says, we got to shore this up, and we have to do it ourselves. And they looked at the Renaissance artists, and they says, we just got to take it a step further and figure this stuff out. And they had some patrons and some sponsors that would do it. Some of them insulated and themselves inside of academia. Lois Lou Jones was at Howard University. And she was able to really execute some programs, travel abroad through the State Department. E.J. Montgomery helped the artists to get abroad and get them sponsored and stuff. But we don't have these kind of significant programs and outreach right now for our artists. We got to cleverly figure that out ourselves, which we can. We have technology. We have platforms like Patreon and stuff like that. You have Najee Dorsey is doing a phenomenal job with Black Art in America. We're trying to envelop everybody in that art ecosystem. That's critical. But we're sort of like in the beginning stages of this new gold rush now. We get to define it, we get to participate in this, and for the young artists like y'all, man, it's wide open. And so what I'm saying, be encouraged. Don't be afraid to to pull some nuggets for some other artists, so that it could expeditiously move you forward. And it's a good sounding board. Kadir didn't do that all by himself. He had an uncle who was a wonderful illustrator that guided him. And so, artists will take the time. I mean, we all grinding. The young and old are still grinding. But, out of respect and stuff, when you come with respect, we're ready to just go ahead and give it to you. Take it and run with it, young artists. Make it happen. And, we want the older artists. I'm an old cat now. We want y'all to take it and run with it. Be tremendously successful. I want to get out here, I want to get in DC. I want to advocate for the artists, at a national level, look at the programming in place like that, get with Sheila. Sheila, how many artists in this particular area, that we got to get some shine on? What do we got to do? What's going on? It's a mounting task, but, we make no excuses. Our ancestors make no excuses. And we pull our narrative together, we package it up, and we present it. And Charles Bibbs and Pancho Brown have been at it, man. I mean, those guys have been doing it for a long time. Gilbert Young is another one who have been touring the line and pushing it forward. Andrew Nichols, he does with the Harlem Fine Arts Show, but Andrew's a good brother and an activist too. And it's a lot of them, man. But this is a hard journey, man. It can be a hard journey. That's why I say you got to enjoy your journey. I watched some of my friends expire, in their journey and stuff. But I know they didn't have any regrets. I know Albert Fennell didn't have any regrets, outside of leaving his family. But Carl Owens didn't have any regrets. They had a love of life, for the arts. And Dale Washington, who just passed, Louis Delasore just passed, all of them in their own kind of way, they embrace their passion to create and tell stories, in their own kind of way, their voice. Each one of us have our own voice, man. We have to enjoy it and, and put it out there. So
So Ted, so we have one in the group chat already, one question from Christina.
Okay.
You are sitting in front of one of your works, and I know some folks have been dying to see that masterful creativity behind you. So can you tell us, can you tell us about the piece behind you?
Yeah. So that's called My Old Quilt. Gosh, it's probably about 9 years ago. I went to an art festival, Fairhope Art Festival, one of the oldest festivals in the country, and I won grand prize. That's the top prize. They give you like $2,500, and all the patrons come in, and they pretty much buy everything out your booth.
Mm-hmm.
And first African American artist to ever win grand prize, and it was an incredible outdoor show. I mean, Fairhope is a robust art community in Fairhope, Alabama. A lot of the writers, film folks come from the East Coast up north, and they situate themselves in Fairhope, Alabama, on this peninsula, this beautiful peninsula. And each year they have this art show. And what I did with this piece, this is a replica, but I sort of embellished it with mixed media. Mm-hmm. And so, I got these bones and different objects and beads that I've been incorporated and having fun with it. So, just an art inspiration thing. And then how, when you talk about objects and artifacts, you're talking about, traditions of Africa. I mean, we take a little bitty stuff out of nothing and make something of it. Mm-hmm. And so that's part of me doing that with My Old Quilt.
Okay. Hey, you guys, that was the only question in the group chat. So, okay. Guess who's coming on board? So first of all, let me just do this. During the last month or so, we've lost some true legends, and we talked about that last week. And so I just, we had a moment of silence for David Driscoll, Eugene Foney, Ron Witherspoon, and Louis Delsart. And so I just want to share this. We have some artists, phenoms on here tonight. Aside from Ted, his colleagues, we have Michael C. Gibson in the place. We have Karen Buster in the place. We have Karen Clark in the place. Also, wait a minute, y'all see that sculpture behind me? That's some Karen Clark right there, man. Nice. And then we have none other but my coach and director, the one and only who Ted was talking about, just came in the room. Mr. Larry Poncho Brown himself is in the room tonight, so we want to give them all shout outs. So we're glad that you all were able to come and hang out with us. And if you would like to be showcased at one of our future sessions, just let me know. But does anyone have any questions for Ted? We're doing really good on time. Anyone have any questions?
Rocket, good.
Yeah, I have two questions. One is really simple. I'm just curious how you can get involved with your commission in any capacity, because that's really interesting to me. But the second one, and I feel like I can just message you later about that.
Okay.
The second one is maybe more of a conversation, something I'm curious about. Because Leonard and I actually did go to Yale, and there's recently been this podcast, the David Zwerner podcast, that interviewed Antoine Sargent and the photographer Tyler Mitchell. And they were talking about how there seems to recently be like a lot of artists coming out of Yale, out of the MFA.
Oh, yeah.
Did you hear it by any chance?
No, I've just watched it over the years, though.
Yeah, I'm curious what you're thinking or what your take on the whole phenomenon is. Like you just said, like we're at the beginning of like some sort of gold rush. Do you think it's sustainable, or what do you think?
Well, I mean, information is moving exponentially. The global economy is small now. And so this whole push of the contributions of African Americans artistically has always been debated for a very long time. So when you're talking about the annals of American art history, we've been excluded. And so the very active art curators, art historians were saying, listen, we need to correct that. What does that look like? We need to be more inclusive. So you had exhibition opportunities with the artists, pretty much out of that spiral art movement, with Bearden and them was pushing Whitney in the MoMA to have exhibitions. That has been a continuous struggle for a very long time. Institutions like Yale, who has a robust African American studies program. I mean, it's just hard not to recognize what they have done. When you're talking about pushing with diversity and inclusion, that has been one of the leading institutions. They also understand the dynamics of culture and the business of culture and economics. I mean, even at Harvard, when you look at the Harvard Gallery, which is a museum, objects and artifacts. Objects and artifacts tell a story of priceless stories. It's also instruments of wealth. You celebrate it, you institutionalize it, and the value typically moves exponentially. So you create value with that. Yale has done a phenomenal job on recognizing contemporary artists of their choice and pushing them through their distribution and their network of affiliates. And those affiliates could be museums, corporations that have a high propensity for supporting Yale and their program. And so when you look at a product or resource like African American culture that's undervalued, it's what Yale has taken advantage of. It's the same thing with Michael Rosenfeld. So when he becomes the dean of African American art, this Jewish art dealer, that just tells you where the value is established at. Yale does a very good job of making that happen once you fall in their distribution. And there's a protocol with that. It's their associations with those institutions, museums, curators, and so forth and whatnot. It's relationship driven. So you see those guys, Barclay Hendricks and stuff, have come out of Yale. You find that they have a higher propensity of success than your normal artists. So when you have an artist like Romare Bearden or Catlett that has to put 30, 40 years in to get recognition, and the only push through is because of their activism. When you get an artist that comes through a program and gets in a Brooklyn museum and every major museum around the country and every major art program, or art fair, it's like, well, here's the keys to this car, because of that. And so outside looking in, and making a check mark and through observation, critical observation, and say, wow, these guys who come and get their MFA out of Yale, man, and these are the ones that you see. There's some other ones that's not on the radar that's doing exceptionally well. They go over to Europe, they spend some time in Europe, they're ateliers, they sharpen themselves, they get the pedigree, they come back to the United States, and they're in all the top tier galleries. Mm-hmm. And so when you have an institution like that understands how to take culture to market, then once you're placed in there, and you see that, then you can take advantage of that. And that's what folks have. Now, the piece with, you're saying, well, you asked me, will this gold rush continue to happen?
And is it sustainable?
Yeah. Oh, if we look at it, it could be the new flavor today. Right now, the flavor's in. So if you were at Art Basel, Forbes magazine and a few others recognize Charlie Palmer, Avita Tiziano, a lot of contemporary African-American artists. Beezer Butler is doing extremely well nationally and is going internationally. These are artists that have done it non-traditionally, but have come up through that are breaking through that ceiling. They're gaining that opportunity through mass art distribution at a high fine art level. You're starting to see that now. It's I don't see it ending. I don't see it ending, because what it does, it becomes an example for others who have the drive, the determination, to make it happen. And so you start charting your course. How many other artists in Chicago looking at Theaster Gates and says, you know what, I like what Theaster did. What's up with that MacArthur Fellowship? Isn't that in Chicago? Then I need to go meet some of those folks. A Whitney Scholar, Whitney Fellow, what's that about? And so we're learning. So about 15 years ago, I said, you know what? They're going to be a group of academic artists that's highly skilled, are going to be in position, and going to really make their mark. Above beyond, I call myself the Gypsy Caravan artist who was out here. Those are the guys that was going to have exponential growth. Kahindi was one of them. Kadir did it a little bit differently, but another one, highly skilled. But that's probably less than 1%. We still have, if I go in the next 25%, opportunity for us out there is incredulous. So on the upside is that you just got to be specific. I said very early, I said, have a sniper's approach, not a shotgun approach. Be very focused on what it is that you want to do. And you got to chart that, and you got to go after it. And you got to say, okay, here's my timeline, realistic timeline, whether that's going to be 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years. My guys who I know has done it in about 15 to 20 years. Where they put a piece out on canvas now, and it's 6 figures. And it's done, and they don't have to work hard. That was the time in. So, you get real fast lane, and you understand, the system, then you could do it in about 8 years. 8 years. That's a time for refinement, getting your portfolio right, getting the right endorsements from those folks if you want to take that route. And that's that's the route that gets you in the textbooks. Get you in the corporate collections, getting the foundations behind you. You may not know it, but the Getty Foundation may be buying your work. There's several African American artists that you don't even see that are positioning themselves that kind of way. So that's that's one vertical market. That art entrepreneur is out there aggressively taking his art to market. From greeting cards to calendars to postcards to T-shirts to umbrellas, whatever you can manifest that opportunity to take your art to market. And then at the same time, you're enlightening folks with that. And then, nothing's wrong if that artist goes out here and creates a wonderful industrious enterprise, an economic enterprise for taking his art to market. And that's a self-defining moment. That's a point of reference that I look at and says, wow, that guy saw value or she saw value in themselves and took it to market in vertical markets. So that's one area. So it's what you decide, how you plan it out, and then work your plan. Plan your work and work your plan. And and it's the joy in it. The artists that have sustained for 20, 30 something years, they love the art. They love their art. They love to tell their story their kind of way.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, so
with the commission, no, that was another thing, how to get involved with the commission.
Yeah.
I suggest the website is www.400yaahc.com.
Okay.
So you can look at that, look at the mission, the intent, and I suggest that one of the things on writing a new history and the preservation of African American history and culture, is to reach out to these academic institutions, Morgan State, Harvard, Yale, Spelman, Morehouse. What's the plan? What's the plan in the preservation of African American history and culture? What does that look like? And then you say, oh wow, well, are you doing any exhibition opportunities? Is there any opportunity for forum discussion? It's so many other things that we have to do to get out in front and to make ourselves even more relevant.
So Rocky, there are three quotables, right? Your passion. Hold on one second, Christine. I got you. There are 3 quotables, Rocky. Your passion plan is your best plan. That's a quotable. That's some good stuff right there. Culture is capital. Culture is currency. That's another one. I hope y'all write these down. I think these are good T-shirts. I'm sorry. Ted and I might have to split money right there, the profit. And the one that Ted has said repeatedly since I've known him is, I'm not in the art business, I'm in the culture business, and my culture is priceless.
That's right.
So, and I see LJP has a Ted
my colored man
right behind him, and I've always loved that piece. Christina, I'm gonna punt to you. You had a question?
I only wanted Ted to repeat the website, 400 what?
Yeah, it's 400YAAHC.com. So the number 400, then Y, then Alpha, History, Charlie.com.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Anyone else have any questions? We have a few more minutes. Anyone else? Leonard?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a question exactly, but I am from New Orleans.
No!
Local senior year. And like, you know, I went to Yale.
Okay.
And like, you know, I went into Yale with a lot of fanfare too. You know, like my whole story, like there was an article about it.
Wow.
It was on the internet. And, you know, right now, you know, I stayed in New Haven after I graduated.
Okay.
And I'm working for an artist, Titus Gafar, who, you know, he applied to Yale School of Art 3 times for those exact reasons. And like the laser focus you talk about, like that's what he talks about. And like, I don't know, it's just like good to hear you say that, because it's like, I don't know, I just feel very lucky, you know, to be getting these lessons like at my age, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, man, I wish I had this early, man. You know, I mean, yeah, I had to pull, some guys had to pull it and extract it out of, you know, some I just had to watch at a distance, and then you had to go through the learning curve yourself. And I'm not the best at it, but we got to have some kind of mentoring program, sharing of knowledge, you know, that we can pass on so that we could build better and be more efficient. That's probably been our challenge. You know, my group of artists it has been the struggle with survivability. You know, how to take what you have to market to survive on it. So, you know, no real sponsors, no real patrons. You know, it's right here for the moment. So we're 40 years, maybe 50 years young, and taking culture to market and sustaining, you know, the importance of culture, how to nurture that. You know, it's been a riff. You know, I mean, where are the Cosbys, where are the Maya Angelos that funded the artists, you know, that got it. You know, gosh, what's her name that Cosby funded? She was taking care of her sister and everything. She did the cartoon for Bill Cosby. Pancho knows her. Out in Los Angeles.
Honeywood.
Vernette, thank you. Yes, yeah, Vernette. Yeah, Cosby was right there. Alonzo Adams, you know, sponsored by Cosby and Maya Angelou. You know, where's Tyler? You know, and the rest of them funding a group of artists. You know, how do we make that package to get in front of them? You know, we've been so immediate. You know, I remember artists would call me up, well, Ted, what you doing next? What festival you going to? What convention you doing? And I said, man, we're just living for the immediate. And this is one level. And then I'm looking at, you know, talking to some of my friends who are college professors and stuff, and I'm watching how they getting these fellowships, and they going abroad, and they teaching, and they doing their serigraphs, and they woodcuts, and they, you know, it's this dual activity going on as a professor and as an artist. And so, you know, they get their tenure, they're ready to retire, then they jump out here, and they've established themselves with, you know, some galleries, some of the dealers, you know, some of the museums. They do it, but then they don't talk to the artists who've been out on the street. You know, what they called us the popular artists at one time. You know, that's like Thelma Golden did that show with Kadir was in that show. Jonathan Romaine was in that show. She got blasted by a lot of other folks in the industry, and nothing was ever done again for your contemporary young artists coming up. So look, here's another one. I come in your front yard, your backyard, I pick your fruit and vegetable, and I step back on the street corner and I sell it to you at a premium. That's typically what art dealers do with our culture. That's what we ought to be doing with our own, taking our own to market from day one. You know, not waiting till I get in the Smithsonian and say, oh, Ted, the best thing ever. Well, Leonard's been the best thing ever since day one. And that's how they see their artistic treasures very early. They develop them very early. You know why some of the artists, African American artists, never come back to our community when they make it? Because we ain't showing them any love during that process. You know, so they skip one right over and say, see you later. I mean, get one of them to come and talk on your program. I mean, see if you can make that happen. Or get them to come to one of the major organizations, African American organizations, at the NAACP, at the Urban League. I haven't seen that happen. One time it happened. That was Jacob Lawrence, that was Elizabeth Catlin and Jonathan Green that the NAACP got. And that's only because Elaine Jones, who was handling the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, was a heavyweight collector and heard some artists saying we need to recognize our own visual artists. But it wasn't in the policy. It's not in the policy of organizations to recognize the importance of African American artists and their contributions. And we've missed the mark. You know, we rather call you guys reclusive, you know, indifferent, you know, they just artists. But I don't hear anybody saying, you know, that art is profound. You know, his artists like Langston Hughes, you know, Richard Wright. Where's that comparison? Because I can look at some art and see some beautiful poetry, you know, and some beautiful history, but we don't take that and own that. We have compartmentalized our artists and placed them at a lower rank, that we're struggling, and what does that bode well for the next generation of talented African American artists who parents says, you know what, I see a glimmer of hope and potential. I'm going to get you in the institution that's going to get you there. But what's frightening, we don't have the infrastructure to support our best and our brightest. You know, that's what frustrates me. And so, you know, the time has come where we activate and we plan. I mean, we really have to you know, work collectively together. I don't have the total solution in it, but you know, just watching, you know, looking at platforms like this, I see a national platform coming out of this. You know, the Zoom conferencing, the talking, the programming, the funding. Listen, the museum industry is a $700 billion industry. That's larger than the construction industry in the United States. What percent of engagement are we having in that? And so that's to be considered, not just with the art lovers, but with the business lovers, you know, on how we manage this and position this, our culture and our history. Yeah. That's what creates value. Do you think, you know, when I go into a museum, you know, how many images do I see of myself? I can take you to the Museum of Fine Art of Houston right now. They don't have a tear sheet on their African American art collection. They don't have a catalog. They don't have a book, but they got one of the most profound collection of African American art. What's the message in that? Now that's a museum institution. A museum institution is dedicated to preserving and documenting their objects and artifacts at every level. And if you don't see that there, what's wrong with that? And so when I look to the leadership in the African American community of Houston, and I'm saying, man, we got some guys who are almost a billionaire, not even saying anything that sits on the board of the museum about this collection. So when being culturally malnourished, you got that, Sheila?
Uh-oh. Okay, I'm writing it.
So when you culturally malnourished, you miss the importance of these objects and artifacts that represent you that should be fully documented. So Houston is a major epicenter of high commerce and trade. In every major center of high commerce and trade, you have a major museum. Boston, Los Angeles, Washington, New York, Miami, Houston. Am I missing somebody? Chicago. That's seven. High commerce major museum. What's the funding capacity for African American artists? Who's advocating for that? Who's speaking to that? And so if nobody else is taking a challenge and a responsibility, then it really falls on the artist at the end of the day to not only be the artist, but to be the advocator, to be the activist. And that's so much history repeats itself all over again with Samela Lewis and Elizabeth Catlett and Jacob Lawrence and Benny Andrews and all those guys who National Conference artists, you know, were in the fight for cultural advocacy and economics, because culture is economics, big time. And it shouldn't just be a little subset. I mean, we need to have this big think tank dialogue going on at these universities. This conversation at Yale, this conversation at Harvard, at Princeton, at Morehouse, at Spelman, at Howard, you know, Morgan State, Dillard University, Xavier University. You know, and so I, you know, there are multiple challenges that we have to navigate. You know, we have to see ourselves as a family. And when I say a family, I'm looking at the collectors, I'm looking at the patrons, I'm looking at the artists, I'm looking at the curators, I'm looking at the galleries. You know, what's the plan? What's the mission? You know, what's our policy? You know, institutions that stand and last for a long time, they have a policy. They have a policy plan, you know, that drives their mission and vision. We need to have a collective across the board. And we need to have that level of syndication that we can come at specific points in time and have this conversation. And we have to take that charge to DC to have some advocacy for funding. Funding starts at the federal level, it filters down to the state and then to the city. And if we don't know how to do that, then we're troubled. But we got to get other players in there. We got to get them to see us more than what they see us at right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we are at 8:30. So we may have time for one more question. So does anyone have any question? Anyone else have any question? Mr. Mora, it's good to see you. It's good to see you.
Let me get here, and it's good to see you all too. This is a wonderful conversation. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
If you all don't know me, I'm Elizabeth Catlett's son. There is the invisible man, Ralph Ellison, in the back there, over there, by the Hudson River on West Harlem, yeah. And the one thing that I would like to start a dialogue, you know, I'm a jazz musician, and I've worked with Sun Ra, with Max Roach. I've been very blessed working with some of our giant histories. And I always have seen a relationship of musicians, visual artists, poets. You know, I had the opportunity of working, you know, with poets as well. And it seems to me that our strength has always been because of our struggle. And our struggle always leads to two things: survival first, you know, like you're talking about, and second, freedom. And this is what we teach the planet, and that's what they follow us, you know, and the point. And we always have to maintain the struggle in order to provide universally. So my, not question, but my concern or my dialogue is, how do we bring all of our different art disciplines in the same collective forum that you are talking about? What is the thinking behind, you know, bringing the musicians and bringing the poets and bringing the visual artists and bringing the dancers and, you know, this collective thing that makes us a lot more stronger, and it gives it more visibility, you know, in one realm or in the other one. Institutions are going to do what institutions do, and we're always going to be a fault at them anyways, regardless. So we need to defend and protect ourselves collectively, and that's my thought. Okay, let me shut off. Put my mute here. Thank you so much for having me. And I need more information on this so I can appear regularly, okay?
Okay, I'll make sure you get it, sir. So I will send you, are you on Messenger? You muted. Are you a Messenger?
Like Facebook?
Yeah, this is how I found you on Facebook. I was just nosing around and I said, wait a minute, there's a Zoom meeting over here of Black artists. Let me see what's going on.
Wow.
So I will make sure you get a personal invitation from me every time we have a session. And there's some, if you go to my page, we've had a couple of different sessions already with Curly Holton, who mentions your mother a lot in there because I think he went to actually stay with her and intern with her for a while. And then we had Michael C. Gibson, who's on the line, and an appraiser, my appraiser. So if you go on my page, Sheila Wright, and scroll down past all my other texts, you will definitely see sessions if you'd like to view any of those. But we are doing this once a week, and I will definitely let you know about every session that we have, because we would love to have you participate.
It's incredible. I just found you all, and this is something that I was meant to be, because it's very refreshing, you know, and being locked up over here in this pandemic situation.
Right.
In it's going on 2 months now.
Yeah.
So
right.
finding ways to create value, finding ways to make new things, and keep on going. Hopefully we'll come out of this one wiser and stronger than we ever been, because we need to continue the work.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we are at 8:34, and I know Karen was looking at her watch. I did see that, Karen. How you doing?
Look, I was 1 second for you. I would like to say, Ted and I go back to our Dillard days, and I want to tell you, I know this was in terms of what you're doing, but I just want to tell you, in terms of an artist to an artist, I'm extremely proud of you. I know one thing that has always been, even from back then at Dillard to date, is your compassion. And I think that it continues to flow from then to right now. And I thank you for that, because, you know, whether or not you're an emerging artist, you've been here a while, you're older than you, whatever, when you speak, people listen. I'm one of them. So I thank you for that. I thank you, Sheila, for also continuing to do this. So again, right on, brother.
Wow. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ted. I'm sorry.
I appreciate the opportunity. You know, I just think, you know, so much of our future is in the hand of our you know, young people and stuff. And you know, what I have not been diligent in is the sharing of information with that next generation of artists. You know, I charge my seniors with the same thing, you know, and here I'm doing the same thing that they did. And you know, it's like you impede progress. You know, you want progress to be, you know, exponential. And you know, I want to do a better job of that. So I want to encourage the young artists to reach out to me as much as they can, you know, when they can, so that, you know, they can extract as much as they can from me now, you know, and use and leverage that. And you know, that just makes it better for all of us. And I say that because for the ones who did share with me when I had time, you know, whether it was with Paul Goodnight Charles Bibbs. I mean, Pancho very early. Pancho was the first artist I reached out to. I was in Decor magazine. He had an ad in Decor magazine. I called him up. He said, "Man, just do your prints and get out there and do it." And I said, "Wow." He answered the phone. And so, I got to be 40-something years ago. I was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And so, that was another artist, contemporary that was willing to share and impart some information. And so, that set my course, my sails. And then, I got very intentional. I started picking up my books, and I got a wonderful library, books on African American art and art history, and started reading. One other thing I do want to say, because I was back and I lost my train of thought when I was talking about the culture bearers and the responsibility of women. So in my museum studies program, there was we had to do a report, and we had to take 10 artists, 10 African American artists. So I initially did 10 African American male artists, and I did the history and their accomplishments on it. And I said, you know what? Now I'm gonna do 10 female artists. And I was very intentional when I did the 10 female artists, because these female artists was the likes of, Lois Mailou Jones, Samela Lewis, Elizabeth Catlett, Margaret Burroughs. And I realized when I thought about, West Africa and being the cultural bearers and their responsibility, that we have to be institutional builders, not just artist builders, institutional builders. So the legacy of Lois Mailou Jones at Howard University, Samela Lewis with the 3 museums, on the West Coast, the Sabo Museum, the Southside Cultural Arts Center.
Margaret Burroughs.
Yeah, Margaret Burroughs.
Yes.
And so these women, crossed the path of Elizabeth Catlett very early, all of them that she imprinted. And so they were all intentional on building institutions. Mm-hmm. So the message in all of that is that we have to be institutional builders. So at the very core, when that common thread, that commonality is that we have to have the mindset of being institutional builders. And that means that level of selfishness that we have to give up to the community to build the community. And that's such a critical piece. Now, Mr. Moore was talking about, building the musicians, the entertainers, and so forth and whatnot. That clarity of thought is profound, because that was part of the conversation very early with W.B. Du Bois. That after the degradation and deconstruction of the Negro, because folks of the other persuasion had just beaten that image down, that the new Negro had to be created. So that was so much the movement of the Harlem Renaissance. And so the question is, how do we get the rest of the folks together in the other art disciplines, that we're on that same page and that same mission? And that means that if it starts with us, we got to have the same voice, the same collective voice as a group of artists. That's why it was so pivotal very early, that National Conference of Artists, the Dedicators, the BAM art movement, the Afro-Cobra movement had their mission and a vision statement on what they wanted to get accomplished. And as a group, then we can go to these other factions of the arts that represents the arts. The folks that are in theater, the thespians, the actors, the Black Actors Guild, we need to touch on the singers and so forth and whatnot, and make our argument, our compelling argument. That means that we're precise with our conversation and our plan and our intentionality of what we want to get accomplished. He mentioned 2 things: struggle and freedom. If there's any time to make an ask right now and then think about a deliberate ask and have a plan of action, it's right now. We got time to put this together, and we have no excuses. We have a mode of communications to get out expeditiously, whether it's Meetup, whether it's Zoom, whether it's free conference call, we have the ability to get that out and do that. So there's a charge for us to sit still for a minute, not only think about the economics, because culture is economics, but we got to get strategic on what our plan is and how we're going to get that accomplished. And we can make those inroads. Ain't nothing new. I mean, those artists, when they got together, they were able to knock down the doors of the Whitney and MoMA and get those art shows. And when nobody else would write about themselves, they would. So the advocacy is a critical piece. What we learned from history is that you have to have advocacy with your creative responsibility. You have to have activism with your creative responsibility. That's very intentional. That's why I say you got to know your art history. You got to know if you want to make that breakthrough. That's how it's going to happen. Those artists who made the breakthrough, they looked at it, they studied it, and they made their moves. Some of them did it individually, and I'll look at some of my contemporary stuff. But collectively, I'm more about this collective thing. You know, the art is an instrument and a resource that I can empower my community. And I know as a whole, when you look at this commodity that's unregulated, deliberately unregulated, that means that the value of it can go exponential. That means that your currency, your culture has exponential value. Now, how is that projected? That's projected in this visual medium. That's tangible. Art is a tangible piece that we should be able to use and leverage and control. And that's part of the conversation that we take to our other brothers in the areas of the art. Help us leverage this opportunity for the greater good of our community. And here's how we plan on doing it. That's my 2 cents.
Okay. So we're now, I'm watching the clock, you guys. So listen, thank you for participating. We will be having another session next week, and I will be sending emails and texts and posting Facebook notices. There are 2 announcements that I do want to share with you. One is that last weekend, phenomenal legendary artist Louis Delsart passed away. I have been in conversation with Raven Fine Arts, and they do have Louis Delsart silk screens available. So if any of you are interested in getting this silk screen work, West End Gem. It is a beautiful piece. If you let me know, hit me up either through text or messenger, and I will share with you the information. It was done in 2018. It is a small edition size of 100, and they're a piece, I believe. So if you are interested, please let me know. As you guys know, because you're in this genre, that it is at this point where the artwork itself will start to rapidly increase in value and also in retail costs. So if you have an interest, please reach out to me, and I will give you the contact information as to how you can acquire. You do not have to go through me to acquire the work, but you can go. I'll give you the contact information and pass it forward as well. And that piece is available. It is beautiful. Matter of fact, Monday, I will be acquiring that one. So I'm really excited about that. The second thing is that we've been getting some really positive feedback about these sessions. We will continue to have these sessions. We will continue to have these sessions weekly. And so to my artist friends out there, if I reach out to you and ask you if you would like to be a featured guest, be gracious and kind. Thank you so much. I will be texting some of you all shortly. And so we will be having those, but in the summer, nice cat. In the summer, I've been working with a team of people who help me to manage my collection. You all have met my appraiser, but there are some other individuals that also help me to manage my collection, including my conservation specialist, the gentleman that captures all my high resolution images, And so it's you know, maintaining a collection is a part-time job, and it can be a full-time job, really, depending on the size of your collection. And so, oh, by the way, Karen, I need to reach out to you because I need to capture my information on the sculpture of your work. But in any event, Karen Clark. Okay, so in any event, we will be having a summer series talking about different aspects of collection management. There will be a cost associated to that, but each session we already have a lineup of what those sessions will be. We have about 6 or 7 sessions lined up, and so as we get a little bit closer, or like towards the tail end of May, we will be sharing with you the different topics we will be covering, and hopefully, as we get that information out, you can share that information with your friends and participate. There will be handouts and all of that, some good information for you to remember. So we have those are the 2 announcements. We have, you know, summer series coming up. We'll continue to offer these sessions for the rest of May and summer series, and we might do a few sessions that are just like this one throughout the summer as well. So if things are gonna pick up for us a little bit, we want you to share this with your friends. The more the merrier. This has been a real successful opportunity for us to get together, artists and collectors and artists as collectors, and share with each other and grow and learn together and network. My last piece, I didn't know Mr. Mora was going to be on the line tonight, so excited. So Mr. Mora, this is a book of my collection. It's about featuring 70 works of my collection. As you can see, your mom's piece is on the cover. Survivor, which is my favorite Elizabeth Catlett linoleum cut. My favorite. Okay, I know people love Sharecropper, and Sharecropper was fantastic, Ted, but Survivor speaks to me. Wow. Okay, and I am a true fan and lover of her work, and so I'd like to connect with you through Messenger or whatever and get your address so I can send you a copy of this book. There are 3 generations. There are a few works of hers that are featured in this book. I got all of the paperwork on permission, so we good. I didn't do anything crazy, but I wanted you to have this, sir, because your mother, as an artist, is a trailblazer. She was a trailblazer and legend, and there, you know, she is, I would say, one of, if not the, my favorite female artist. I just love her work, and that's all I can say. I love her work, Rocky. She's in here, Rocky. Her work speaks to me and just does something to my spirit. And Ted can tell you he's been to my little home galleria. Very nice. And she is prominent in it. And so I'm excited to meet you, sir. And so I'd like to get some information so I can send this.
Let me just say something that Ted Ellis was talking about. When he go to a museum and is looking around for something that looks like him. And I asked my mother, just contribute to this reunion, you know, what motivates you to do your work? He says, I'm trying to do something so strong and so fine that it can go into a museum. So when our people go to a museum, they have something that they can relate to.
Right. Yes. So I can tell you the first time I saw a sculpture, I don't have any of her sculptures yet. That's a goal. But when I saw, that's a goal, I might have to sell a couple of kids and have my collection to be able to afford it. I'm just joking. I don't have any kids. But anyway, and I don't believe in that marketing stuff. So whoever's listening, don't. It was just a joke. But in any event, I saw a sculpture. My first vision or my opportunity to see a sculpture was at the Stella Jones Gallery in 2004 in New Orleans. And I think I stood there and cried. So I just, her work just affects me profoundly. So I just wanted to share that. You guys look forward to getting a notice about next week's session. And if there's nothing else, please stay safe. We want to come back here together again next week. Let me ask a question real quick. Is Monday better or Tuesday better? Monday or Tuesday, or it doesn't matter?
It doesn't matter.
Tuesday's better.
Tuesday's better. I agree.
Tuesday's better.
Okay.
Sheila, I have that, my commission call every Monday, so it's at the same time.
Okay, so what I will do is I will switch to Tuesday. Yay! So I look forward to seeing all of you back here next Tuesday, and I'll send out the notice, okay?
Perfect,
so you
perfect.
have a wonderful, does somebody have a question?
No.
No, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you,
Thanks,
brother.
guys.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you so much. Have a wonderful
Thank you, Ted Ellis.
day.
The man, the myth, the legend.
What's up? What's up? Oh.
Have a good one, you guys. Stay safe.
We're going to do some great things.
Safe.
All right.
So
Thanks.
Ted,
Thank y'all so much.
Ted, what's the email I can?
Oh, yeah. Ted Ellis Art @gmail.com.
Okay.
Okay, Devo, I will send you the particulars, okay?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. See you guys.
Thank
Good night. Thanks, y'all.
Good night.
All right, Rocky.
Thank you.